Ahoy, mateys! Are you ready for a data mine?
Alright, we're gonna stop that. Pirate jokes aside, we have a new event and a lot of tentacles incoming. Royal Fortune is going to be getting a lot of new friends today as it is a Tempesta event. Tempesta and the Fountain of Youth. This event will bring us 5 new ships, 5 new augment modules, a bunch of new skins, 6 new gear, and 3 new Meowfficers. So before we talk about the event specifically, we'll talk about some of the patch note updates related to the game. We will be getting a new feature where you can share your fleet compositions with their equipment. This was something that they spoiled in a previous live stream, and we're finally getting it into the game now. Additionally, there's going to be some changes around the Tempesta faction and the frigates as a whole type. Tempesta ships will now have fleet tech, so collecting them will now contribute towards your fleet tech totals. Additionally, there will now be 3 types of frigates. There will be frigates that go in the submarine fleet, frigates that go in the main fleet, and frigates that go in the vanguard fleet. So now all of these pirate ships can go in any of the 3 fleets. Each ship is going to be specifically designated one of those types, so frigate M, frigate S, frigate V. This means that Royal Fortune will become a frigate S. However, in this event there will be other types of frigates, and that means you'll be able to have your frigates in your main fleet and use them for those types of content. Also, speaking about changes to Royal Fortune, she will be permanently added to the core shop after this update. In addition to our main event, there will be 2 mini events that come with this update: the Secret Shipyard, which gives us a limited furniture, and the Manju Bounties, which is going to give us 2 of the 3 new Meowfficers. Also, keep in mind the Meowfficers are going to be time limited, so if you don't get them during this event period, you will never be able to get them again until it gets rerun. They're not being added to the general Meowfficer pool. So with that, let's talk about more of the specifics related to this event. We are getting a new pirate dorm set theme. We are also getting a bunch of new gear skins related to this pirate theme, and I have to say this is one of my favorite sets of gear skins that they've released in a while. I am going to be going hard for these. Ships of the line, cutlasses, compasses, firearms, tentacles, treasure chests, hooks, cannonballs, eye patches, what's not to like? You can pick up extra of these gear skins in the event shop, but be careful. This event shop is loaded. Not only are you going to have an SR ship in here and the 3rd Meowfficer you can obtain in the event shop only, on top of all the regular goodies, there are going to be 3 new equipments that you need to get in the event shop. So this event is going to be something that you need a lot of event points for, especially if you don't pick up the SR ship in a drop or the gacha. There are also a lot of prizes in the milestone rewards this event as well. There are multiple items that you can get there too that you're going to want to pick up. And finally, as with every new event, we're going to be getting new skins. Each of the 5 new ships is going to be getting a new skin. We're also going to be getting some new skins for other ships as well. And these skins will be available in the lucky bag and some of them for rental as well. When Manju was making the golden Hind skin, were they wondering if they needed to have a lingerie skin, a wedding skin, or a Halloween skin, and just went yes to all of it? And with that, let's get into some stats. We're actually going to start off with the equipment today. This is because all of the ships today are going to be some form of a frigate, and those frigates can only equip these cannons. So let's talk about the cannons that they're restricted to first, so we can get a sense of what their equipment restrictions are when we're going through those ship stats. So because the event map actually has something to grind this time, this event is going to be a 6-map event, and T6 is going to have this brand new SR equipment that is droppable. This is where you want to grind. It also has repair toolkits and boilers like grind T6. So in T6 drops this SR heavy artillery. It effectively is a DD gun that can only be equipped by the frigates. It can be equipped by all 3 variants of the frigates. And it's really like the 12-pounder long gun SR equipment that came with the original Royal Fortune event. It takes a little bit longer longer to fire, so it has a longer fire rate, but it does a ton more damage. It has more firepower boosting. Its armor modifiers are better. They're literally just better against heavy armor. And across the board, it's generally better unless you need something that has a high firing rate. So you definitely want to pick this up if you're going to use Tempesta ships. You can get 2 from the event shop, and then you can keep grinding them in T6. The rare version is just a weaker version of the SR version. There's no reason to use that. Next up, we have the old half cannons. Again, there is a rare and an SR version. We're only going to talk about the SR version because it's strictly better. These are treated like battleship guns because guess what? Frigates are now going to be able to be in the main fleet. These can only be equipped by the main fleet version of a frigate, and so these are going to only be applicable to the backline ships that come from this event. You can't put these on any battleships, and you can't put any of the battleship guns on any of the backline frigates. The power of this gun is going to be crucial to the power of the Tempesta faction because the backline for the Tempesta faction is going to have to use these. So let's analyze these and compare them to what a traditional battleship gun is going to do. First things first, I want to take a note of the damage that it deals. 78 times 6. This is a lot different than other battleship guns. Battleship guns typically fire either 2 or 3 shots. This is going to be firing 6. So even though it's only dealing 78 damage per shot, and a lot of the other battleship guns will do like 150 to 200, this will actually theoretically outdamage even like the 457. Now, that's not going to happen in reality because there are going to be so many of these and the spread's going to be around and they're not necessarily all going to hit. Additionally, the fire rate on this is pretty slow. It's kind of in the range of a 406 millimeter, which is kind of slow, especially if you don't have anything to speed it up. Also, ammo type is going to be HE, so it's going to have your traditional standard HE ammo type, and that is actually going to be able to cause fire as well. And in terms of range and firing angle and all those other sort of stats, this actually looks like a pretty good gun. It's actually going to fire 6 shells per shot fired. You're going to be able to tear your enemies to shreds with this potentially, or at least it's going to look like that. It's probably not going to out damage your best battleship guns, but it doesn't really need to. As far as I'm concerned, this is not the biggest hindrance that I thought it might have been. We'll see how the ships are, but this is not a guaranteed like this is terrible and these ships have to be amazing to make up for it. This is an okay gun. It's going to do the trick in a lot of cases. And for the final 2 equipment that we have in this event, we are going to have 2 elite auxiliary items. One of which you can get in the event shop and the other that you can get from a milestone reward. And I just have to say it's hilarious to me that the HP item has to be the oranges. When you're out at sea, you gotta prevent that scurvy, am I right? Anyway, the oranges can only be equipped by a frigate, and it has the standard 500 HP that an elite item that's HP item related has. When your HP is lower than 60%, you heal 5% and that procs once per battle. That's actually really good. This is a very powerful heal. In many instances, it's actually better than a repair toolkit. Sadly, it can only go on a frigate, so it's not going to have super impact, but I could definitely see someone running this on one of the frigates that has to be in the Vanguard fleet. Next up is the Spyglass, which gives hit stat and evasion stat, which on its own sounds actually pretty decent. This is a fun item there, and once again can only go on frigates. However, the skill is interesting. It increases the hunting area, which is kind of funny since this item can be put on any of the frigates, including the ones that are not submarine related. And the hunting area obviously only applies to the submarines. It increases about 2 squares when you upgrade the level, and every frigate is going to have a different version because that's just how submarines work. So you might get those 2 blocks, you know, in different spots depending. That's not a huge skill benefit there, but the hit stat evasion's kind of fun. Ironically enough though, submarines or the submarine versions of frigates probably need this the least of the sets. Like for the ones in the Vanguard might want the evasion to hit stat, even the backline might want it too. So it's kind of funny that they put a submarine skill on it. Anyway, item wise, these are all items you're probably going to want to pick up, especially if you ever plan on playing Tempesta. You're going to need most of these items, so don't don't skimp on these. Pick them up. I know this is an event you're going to have to play a lot to actually get all of this stuff. All right, with that, we actually finished all of the equipment, which means we can move on to the ships. And I'm actually going to do the augment modules along with the ship because the augment modules are coming with the ship immediately. So we might as well look at them together because as of part of upgrading them to the max, you're going to put an augment module on them. It's that simple. First up is SR Sao Martinho, which is a sailing frigate that can go in the main fleet. So she's going to act like a battleship. She's light armor with 6,000 health and 430 firepower. So very squishy, but she actually has decent firepower here. This is something of the tune similar to Vittorio Veneto, so she can deal some damage for real here. Her accuracy is a little bit on the lower end, but it's about where a lot of the Italian battleships are anyway, and her reload is a little bit on the higher end. As far as stats wise, she's pretty decent damage dealing. It's just gonna be a problem of squishiness. And as expected from a 1500 ship, she has no anti-air and no anti-air to equip, so she is going to completely die to planes. And she's gonna die to a lot of things, actually. But look at that damage. Can we just look at the equipment? She's got a battleship gun with a main gun mount of 6. That means on top of her equipping that cannon that fires 6 shells in a shot, she's going to be firing it 6 times in a salvo. That's like, what, 36 shells to just pummel the enemy? Oh my. And that's on top of the fact she has 2 destroyer gun slots, which obviously are going to have to be that other cannon, but that's basically 4 more shots at 175% efficiency. She is going to be shrekking people with firepower damage here, and those battleship guns are going to be HE ammo too, so they're going to be on fire. This is somewhat weaker because it is limited to those weaker cannons, and she can't put on like traditional battleship or destroyer guns, but like those guns aren't awful. At least the battleship gun isn't awful, so like this is still going to do a chunk of damage. I'm just excited to see how many of these things go flying. Like there's going to be shells flying all over your map if you're using her, and that's just from the stats alone. And then we just got to get into the skills, and if she has a barrage or something, wow, your map might just fill up. Anyway, let's go on to skill number 1. She gets plus 10% firepower. That's great. More damage. She's gonna literally be tearing people to shreds with her shells. Minus 20% damage taken. That's almost a must for her to be any remotely version of survivable. Like no anti-air. This is kind of affecting being the anti-air for her, is that damage reduction. It looks like a lot, and it is, but just like she's so squishy base-wise, it's just kind of making up for lost ground. At the start of the battle, she gains a barrier that blocks 10% HP for 30 seconds, so that's once again trying to get survivability in here because her stats are so low. Also, she's a faction buffer. All Tempesta faction ships, including herself, get plus 10% firepower and plus 10% damage dealt. So she's gonna get, in this skill alone, plus 20% firepower and plus 10% damage dealt, just herself if she's alone, and then she can buff the other Tempesta faction ships. So she is the lead faction buffer. So we have to see what the other ships do and how important this is, but that's super cool. And obviously the damage reduction part is gonna help in just survivability. Skill number 2 changes her armor type to medium, which is kind of odd, but I guess they just wanted to make the ship be light armor to be more consistent with the other frigates, but also have her be medium armor to not just have like this weird light armor in the backline. If there are 2 or more Tempesta ships in the fleet, her first main gun salvo cooldown is reduced by 80%, which is amazing because if we remember, the shot is going to be, I think it has a 24-second cooldown, the only cannon that she can equip, and so reducing that is going to be super important. So this is great. Like she's going to fire really early in the battle. Additionally, when she fires her main gun, she triggers a special barrage. This barrage has a 10% chance to cause flooding for 18 seconds. All right, well, this ship is the definition of a glass cannon. Like, it fires early, it fires so many shells, it does flooding damage and barrages, and it buffs. Like, this is a super cool faction buffing ship for the pirate ships. I actually, like, really enjoy this ship. I'm not saying that this ship is amazing, because I just don't see it being able to survive any of the late worlds in PvE. I don't see it being able to do enough in PvP. I really don't see this this being a meta ship in any sort, unless, of course, the other frigates are just off the walls amazing and you need this to faction buff them. But this looks like to be a perfect start to a fun minor faction that you can use together in most content. I still think you're going to struggle a lot in like any world that has a lot of planes, because I don't think any of these frigates will have anti-air. I'll have to look through them, but given that they're frigates, they probably won't have anti-air. So I don't know. This is a really cool ship. I'm very excited for this one, and it has actually made me excited to look at the other 4 ships we're looking at today. But before we get into them, we have to look at the augment module for her, and her augment module gives her 200 HP and 14 hit stat. Okay, the HP is kind of weird. I'd rather it actually just be firepower or something that we can lean into our advantage that we have here dealing damage. Her effect is aviation damage taken minus 20%. Okay, so that covers the anti-air basically by having her augment module, whatever that thing is. And then it heals 8% of her health 40 seconds after the battle. So she gets a heal, and basically this is her anti-air gun. So this is going to be necessary to run her at all. Also, for her skill upgrade, she's going to remove the faction requirement. So she no longer needs 2 other Tempesta ships to trigger her skills. She just gets it all the time. And that can be helpful if you want to use her outside of a fleet. I don't know. I don't know what the other ships do yet. If the other ships are good, I would assume you want them together. Like, her main thing she does is buffing everybody in this faction. So I'd assume you want to run her in a faction fleet, but this removes that restriction if for some reason you don't need it. It's always better to not have the restriction than have it. So like most augment modules, this just makes her better, but it almost feels like a requirement to have this to even run her. Otherwise, she'll just die so quickly. All right, moving on to the next ship is the SR Golden Hind. This is a sailing frigate that can be used in the Vanguard fleet. So the first of that we're going over. She's going to be in the gotcha only. She's light armor, and she's going to be comparable to a destroyer. Health-wise, she's a little bit higher than your traditional destroyers, and her firepower is pretty high, but she's not going to have any torpedo stat or aviation stat. She gives up her torpedo mount for what effectively is a main gun +2 on her destroyer gun, so a lot of firepower, although she has to use the frigate version of the destroyer gun, not any of the good ones, not the ones that have HE ammo or stuff. She also gets a 3rd auxiliary slot, which is very unique. This will replace her anti-air gun mount. She still seems very squishy compared to your traditional destroyer, partially because of that anti-air ability, and also because her evasion is so much lower than what a traditional destroyer is. So hopefully she has a lot of damage reduction skills, just like the last ship. Skill number 1, she gets plus 12% firepower and reload. Those are good things because that's her damage dealing stuff. She's also going to generate a special zone around herself. Enemies inside this zone are slowed by 20% and take 30 damage per second. This is increased to 60 damage per second when you have another Tempesta ship in your fleet. So you're going to want to pair her with that first ship we went over, and then she's going to basically have a zone around her. And this is partially going to decide how good this is based on how big that zone is. But generally, having a slow in a zone with a damage over time seems kind of nice. You're actually going to almost want to get really close and kind of not necessarily ram, but get very close. But given that she seems very squishy, I'm a little bit nervous about doing that. But let's go on to skill number 2 to see what that says. Minus 15% damage taken. That's going to be helpful with our survivability issue. Also, every 18 seconds, she's going to trigger a special barrage. If you have the augment module equipped to her, enemies hit by this barrage are going to take 6% more damage from Tempesta ships for 6 seconds. That includes her, so even if she's alone, you can still get a benefit from that augment module upgrade. Also, when her HP becomes lower than 50%, that's with the augment module, 40% without, she heals herself for 15% of her health. That is a big heal, and then she becomes invincible for 3 seconds, and this can only proc once per battle, obviously. So this skill gives her an invincibility, and that's interesting. Like, it also happens with an augment module at half health. She's going to heal up to 65%, go invincible for 3 seconds. Like, that's going to help a lot. Obviously, she still has issues with survivability, but going invincible is really great, and we can buff her a lot here. She's also going to do a lot less damage, though, than our previous ship, but but she still can deal a good chunk of firepower damage. She's basically got a main gun +2 for her specific cannon destroyer gun. She also has an all-out assault, and that triggers every 30 main gun shots, so that's going to take a while. It might warrant running the faster fire rate cannon to get that off, but maybe not. Additionally, let's take a look at that augment module real quick. It gives 30 firepower and 15 evasion. Those are good stats we want for this ship, definitely. Additionally, its skill says aviation damage taken by this ship is minus 25%. So there's your anti-air gun. It's literally just your augment module. Additionally, she gets minus 10% all damage taken. Doesn't matter what the source is. And that happens for the first 40 seconds of the battle. So she's literally going to be taking like neg 35% aviation damage for the first 40 seconds. Like, this is just a smoke screen. It's literally just a free smoke screen. It's amazing. And then also it upgrades the skill that we talked about earlier that allows her to deal more damage with her barrage, and also allows her to trigger her heal earlier. All right, let's finish up the SR Sailing Forgets of this event. This one is related to the submarine faction. It's Mary Celeste. She's going to be available in the gacha, but she's also going to be available in the event shop and a map drop, so you can get her multiple ways. She is going to be very much like Royal Fortune. She's going to be treated like that. She has basically the same efficiencies, the same main gun slot. She effectively has like a main gun mount of 4 for her destroyer gun. Of course, she has to equip the cannons. She can't use any of the good destroyer guns. In terms of her stats, she's going to have a little bit lower firepower than Royal Fortune and a little bit more health, and she's going to be very similar, at least stat-wise, to her. So let's move on to the skills. She's going to deal 20% more damage, so it's going to really help with the damage output that she has. Also, whenever she's attacked, 50% chance to enter the Umbra mode that lasts 5 seconds. That is going to trigger a ton. Any type of those triggers that are like when you attack happens a lot, and have it be 50% is a massive proc rate here for this type of skill. When this triggers, she gets 10% evasion rate, so that's going to help with her survivability. And when this mode ends, so that's after that 5 seconds goes away, she is going to fire a barrage. And then there's a 15-second cooldown, which needs to be there. Otherwise, you would just be proccing this all the time and there would be crazy amounts of damage. So the 15-second cooldown is very understandable. If she has her augment module equipped, this barrage gets a little bit better. Before the barrage hits, she randomly selects an enemy, and that enemy gets 15% more damage from this ship for 5 seconds, which is, all types of damage, but a lot of it is going to be coming from this barrage because it's gonna, pick the enemy and then you're gonna fire the barrage. So that's gonna be more damage. And then also the barrage is gonna hit critically all the time. So this is gonna be, more damage, or just a better barrage effectively is what her augment module skill upgrade will do. All right, moving on to skill number 2. She gets plus 10% firepower, and when she enters the battle, she gets a 25% heal. So because she's like in the sub faction, this means that every time you call your sub, she just heals 25%, which is great if you're in a map where you need to keep bringing her back. Got to do 6 battles or something, and she just gets to heal 25% right off the bat every time. So that can help with her survivability in between the different sorties. When she's in Umbra mode from skill number 1, when she activates it at least, she heals 5%. So that is going to be triggering potentially every 15 seconds. She's going to get a 5% heal. So that's a lot of healing as well on top of that. And then 5 seconds after she has her HP go below 40% for the first time, or when she has fought for 60 seconds. So this is kind of like an interesting thing. Royal Fortune has something similar to this. It's kind of a weird skill, but when either of those triggers happen, she summons a ghost ship that inherits all of the ship's stats. It does not attack. The inherited stats are based on the level of the skill, and this lasts for 5 seconds, and this ship actually retreats after you summon the ghost ship. This is kind of like a weird effect. You kind of like are dropping a dummy. Like, you're like, here's my dummy. It's not going to attack. It's going to take away the aggro. Like, you're going to fire things into it. And yeah, it's just kind of like a damage sink almost. And you get to save your HP for this ship as it gets to retreat. It only lasts 5 seconds, but it's a very interesting skill, especially given it's a ghost ship and whatever. I'm interested to see how like they made it look. But this skill is going to help actually make your subfleet kind of soak damage, so to speak, which is kind of funny. Although I don't think it's going to be a great skill, but it's kind of fun. And then she gets an all-out assault. It fires every 40 shots. That is a lot. Before we finish up with her, let's look at her augment module. So her augment module gives her 170 HP and 15 hit stat. Once again, HP on what effectively is a submarine is not a huge impact, but whatever, we'll go with it. She also has minus 15% aviation damage taken, so that's her anti-air gun, I guess, kind of. I mean, she's not hidden, so like traditional submarines, so she kind of still needs it. At the start of the battle, she spawns a barrier that blocks 6 bullets and lasts for 10 seconds. So she basically just makes a barrier and some aviation damage reduction. And then she also makes her barrage stronger. That's what her skill upgrade does. This is definitely the worst augment module we've seen so far. This does barely anything. It doesn't give her the stats she wants. The damage reduction is the weakest of all of them here. The barrier is not really going to make a huge impact on survivability compared to the damage reduction and the heals of the other ones. And her, whatever, we make the barrage slightly better. Like, cool, it gets to crit now. Yeah, this is like definitely one of the weakest augment modules I've gone over so far today. All right, that is all the SR ships, so let's move on to the elites. We'll start with Whydah, because why duh? She is also a sailing frigate that goes in the submarine fleet, so we're going to compare her to Mary Celeste and Royal Fortune. Her stats are a bit weaker. She has a lot less HP. Her firepower is very marginally lower. She does increase her reload and accuracy, so that's kind of nice, but her main gun efficiencies are lower, which are going to hurt, especially since, these ships rely so much on their firepower efficiencies to get that damage done, and they're very squishy. Skill number 1, when she enters the battle and every 10 seconds afterwards, she triggers a barrage, and then if she has her augment module, if any enemy survives this barrage, she gets a negative 25% damage reduction, which might last for the rest of the battle. This is kind of a weird, it doesn't have necessarily a cooldown stated in the text, but it's still just a barrage, and the damage reduction, even if it was like a permanent 25% damage reduction, she's so squishy. It's like, okay, cool. The other ships are basically getting that anyway, so she is just getting it this way. Skill number 2, after entering the battle, plus 15% firepower, and she heals 8% of her HP per second for 5 seconds. Okay, well, that's a lot better. I was like, 8%, that's not a lot, but it's per second for 5 seconds. So that's 40% HP when she enters the battle healing. That might be one of the biggest heals I've seen. That's like that crazy siren that was like healing, or was it an Arbiter or whatever, in Operation Siren that was just healing like crazy. That's how this ship almost feels. 5 seconds after the HP falls below 30% for the first time, or when the ship has fought for 45 seconds, she retreats from the battle. And then she has an all-out assault with 40 shots. So honestly, this seems like a weaker version of Mary Celeste. She's trying to do almost all of the same things, except she's just worse. So she seems kind of like collection only. I mean, technically none of these ships seem like breakout meta defining whatever, but they're more fun. Use her, I guess, if you want to have a full fleet, because now you can have Whydah, Royal Fortune, and Mary Celeste. So if you want to have a full pirate fleet for your submarines, you're obviously going to need to use her. Hopefully in the future, we'll get another Tempesta event, and we can get a better SR version of the sailing frigate in the submarine fleet. But for now, if you want to complete that type of fleet, you're definitely going to need to pick her up, but she's probably the weakest of all of the Tempesta ships so far that we've gone over. And she's weaker than Royal Fortune too, so she's the weakest Tempesta ship so far, but we do have one more Tempesta ship to go over, and she's also an elite. But before that, let's just make sure her augment module doesn't fix something. So her augment module gives her 170 HP and 15 reload. She also gets a minus 15% aviation damage taken, and then at the start of the battle, she's going to block 6 bullets. So it literally feels exactly the same as Maria Celeste, and then she's going to improve her barrage. So another terrible augment module, unfortunately, doesn't really fix anything about her. But these are the submarine fleets, so they are probably the least important of any of them. So the final ship we have is an elite Sailing Frigate that goes in the Vanguard slot, so it's going to be similar to Golden Hind. She actually has 4,391 health. That is a lot of health for something that is supposed to be like a destroyer, although honestly it might be more attuned to a heavy cruiser given that evasion is so low. She does actually have more firepower than the SR Sailing Frigate for the Vanguard fleet, so that's interesting. But it very quickly becomes not interesting because she has lower efficiencies for her equipment, and most importantly, she does not get a main gun +1 for her first main gun slots. So she's going to have less shots to fire, and they're going to be weaker shots. So even though she has higher firepower, she pretty much loses that immediately from those other components. So additionally, let's see what her skills are, because if we are going to be running something like a Sao Martinho, Adventure Galley would be something we'd want to maybe consider putting in. So anyway, skill number 1 for Adventure Galley, she gets +10% evasion stat. When this ship's slot 1 equipment fires, she fires a special barrage. So basically, instead of getting a main gun +1, she's going to get a barrage that fires every time that her, first gun shoots. So that kind of catches that back up depending on how good that barrage is. Skill number 2, she gets +7% evasion rate. So this one's different than the evasion stat from before. That's great. When her HP falls below 35%, she heals herself for 8% of her HP. That procs once per battle. When she has the augment module equipped, she effectively gets this twice per battle. She gets it once when she falls below 50%, and then again when she falls below 35%. So she falls below 50% and heals, and then falls below 35% and heals again. Both of those can only proc once per battle. Now let's look at her augment module. She's going to get +30 firepower and +14 hit stats. So finally, we're actually getting stats we care about. She gets -25% aviation damage taken and -10% damage taken for the first 40 seconds of the battle. So literally an identical skill to what Golden Hind has. And then she gets, an extra heal on her skill. So certainly not as good as Golden Hind, but something that seems usable at least for an elite ship. That seems good. All right, before we have a full review of what we want to go over, we still have 3 Meowfficers. Man, this video is getting long. Reminder that these Meowfficers are going to be limited to this event, so you're going to want to prioritize getting them. These Meowfficers are also not going to be in the general build pool, which means we're not going to be actually rolling for any of their abilities. They're going to come with predetermined set abilities. So the first cat is the SR Drake. Her skill is that your frigates in your main fleet and your Vanguard fleet get an evasion boosts according to her tactics stat. Additionally, for her ability, she's going to get a firepower, torpedo, and aviation buff by 10 stats, and then you lose luck by 3. She's going to also boost the firepower of your battleships and stuff. She's going to increase the damage your fleet does by 3%, so that's kind of nice. You automatically get that skill. And then she also boosts the evasion of your destroyers and submarines, and she has more firepower boosting for your battleships. So she's got a lot of skills, but she does seem oriented towards, your frigates, so you're not going to really use her unless you're running frigates in your fleet. The other SR is going to be Kid, and her skill reads: when this fleet has any frigate, so it could be in any of the frigates, in accordance with the Meowfficers tactics stat, she reduces all cruisers, light cruisers, heavy cruisers, and also the Vanguard frigates, damage they receive. So she's a damage reduction skill as long as you have 1 frigate in your fleet. She also has, the same skills that, give firepower, aviation, and torpedo stat for luck. Her fleet damage skill is there. She's going to be giving her firepower buffs to the cruisers. She gives Vanguard hit stat, and she's going to give evasion to your cruisers as well. So she's definitely a cruiser cat. She's actually probably a very good cat, might be the best cat here, but she does kind of almost require you to have a frigate somewhere in order for her to proc that skill. But she actually seems ironically pretty good and a cat you might use. Then finally, we have the Bellamy cat. She's an elite cat, so not expecting too much. She gives luck and ships that take 3% less damage. That just seems like a good skill all around. She then gives firepower to your cruisers, and she gives HP guarantee to your destroyers and submarines. She also gives you fleet speed. So kind of funny because that luck will kind of almost offset what your other 2 cats are doing losing luck. I would say the only thing that you'd use her for is that guaranteed like minus 3% damage taken, but I don't know. It's like a cute pirate cat, so you probably pick it up, but I don't foresee myself using this elite cat very much. I think there's only like 1 or 2 elite cats that I actually use consistently, and this is definitely not going to be one of them. So these cats are very more oriented towards, especially the 2 SR ones, towards the frigates, which makes sense. They're Tempesta faction cats, but I don't know how much we're going to use them. Maybe Kid. I think Kid has the best chance of me actually using her. Anyway, that's the new cats. As far as the event goes, I think this is actually a really fun event. We're getting more gears. Like, they're just kind of building up this faction. And this faction is at least ships that existed. They're ships from, like, the 1500s. So, you know, not anything related to World War II ships. They're kind of funny. But I'm really excited to see, like, how many shots of artillery are going to be firing. Because, like, they're going to fire so many cannons. It's going to be kind of crazy. Especially the Sao Martinho. I'm super excited to play this event. There's a lot of playing this event, though. There's a lot of things that you need to pick up in the shop because this factions particularly needs its own equipment. Like, it can't use any other equipment, and because of that, you're going to need to make sure you get all the equipment you need from this event, which means a lot of grinding and things like that. So it's going to be a busy event, but it's going to be kind of fun. Hopefully it doesn't hurt our cubes too much. Nothing here is something required for the meta unless you really like tentacles or pirates or whatever. So, you know, you don't need to go super hard into this. We do have a UR event coming probably in a month and a half, but it's a fun event. I'm actually super excited for this. I think it could be a fun minor faction event. All right, guys, thank you guys for watching. And just before you go, I want to give a huge shout out to the data mining team. They do a great job in each of these maintenance updates. It's a lot of work, and this update especially was a lot of work with the new types of ships, and there's just a lot of going back and forth, and it was a long time just making sure that we got everything right. And we just want to give a special thanks because I know this update had even more struggles than the traditional one, and it's a lot of work regardless. So thank you to them for helping do this, and thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.